Hey everyone, today we'll be teaching you guys a little bit of a tips and tricks when it comes to merging both workflows, especially for art assets that includes sculpting and at the same time hard surface, and how you can merge both of those workflows into one. So a good example of that is that I recently released a video about the proper or the quality workflow of importing to ZBrush, and also some other workflows that I've also uh, taught you guys about creating Highpoly first in ZBrush and then figuring out the Lowpoly after. So today, for this particular part of the video, I'll be teaching you guys starting from your Highpoly in Hardsurface, and then you focus on your Lowpoly afterwards. So let's begin. So in this session, I'll be teaching you guys I'll be breaking down how I created this wonderful lamp. What do you call this? This candle holder. So this wonderful candle holder for your walls, right? So I'm going to teach you guys how you create this, and basically for my approach on this one, I just have to start with my Highpoly. So basically this one right here, I just have to do a mock-up using cylinders for my Lowpoly. So let me start with this one. So when I created this, I basically just started everything with a Lowpoly, but since I'm using Hardsurface, I have particular ways of doing it. So say example, when I'm working with my Highpoly directly, I usually like to start with cylinders or any nearest shape, and start to mock up the shape first. So in this example, what I did was I started with, I think I got a, what was that? I think a 12 cylinder type geometry. And then from there, all I have to do was basically, I would extrude this out just like that. So now that I know that I'll be using this for Hardsurface, I would also know that it will collapse on its own. So you have to make sure that you will also be putting some supporting edges, just so it's not going to collapse it fully. So in here, I just have to put this on the side, just like that. So as you can see, I have this taper going here in the front, but I also have a hard edge, but not hard edge. It's still tapering, but it's gonna be a smaller taper. So the thing is that if you think about hard surface, the simplest principle would be like this. Making sure that that the ball or that the object does not collapse on its own weight. Think of it as like that. Think of it as like building a tent. So building a tent basically requires you adding structure, right? Making sure that those beams, those structures are supporting its own weight, and also that making sure that it does not collapse on its own. So it's the same thing for that, except that this one line right here cannot support on its own weight. So if you, let's say example, I'm gonna add an edge here. If I add an edge there, it will make sure that it does not collapse on that specific area. So imagine this. So we have this. As you can see, we can preview the box at the same time. You can see it as it collapses. What we're going to do is we're going to add another face in here. As you see now, it can support its weight slowly, but we add another edge in there. Oh, and now it could support its weight on the top. So that's why it's really important that you have at least one edge per face. So I have one edge supporting this area, I have one edge supporting this area, and I have another edge supporting this area. So it's doing it in all three axes. It's really important that you always have this square on every, or this, this three edges, or whichever area that you're putting it to. So it's really simple as that. And let's keep adding more edges in here. So as you see, the more we add edges, the more that it can basically support itself. Now it's 100% a cube. But if we did not add that supports, those additional supports, it's not going to be a cube. So if you also think about it, that if you're going to move this away from, a little bit more further away from the edge, the further it is, the smoother it gets. So if I move both of these axes away from the edge, it becomes smoother. It has more taper. So this is the beauty with with Hardsurface, is that you can the closer it gets, the tighter it gets. So it's the same thing with every single part in 3D modeling. So if you're going to get it as close as you want, it gets it gets it as tighter as it is. So if you don't want that, you want to have some bevel or some edge highlights from afar, then you have to make sure that that your edges are not too tight. You have to make sure that it's equally balanced. So it's as simple as that. So now we're applying the same principles when we're looking at these objects. And basically, if you think about it, when I'm also doing this in my personal workflow, I usually tend to work having subdivision turned on, so that when I'm selecting objects, I can see it in what it looks like on smoothing groups. So if I drag an edge here, I could see it how it looks like in real time in previewing this. So you can do the same thing too. So for me, let's say I want to make this type of pattern right here, this tightening looking pattern. So if I want to do that, I'd like to start myself with a cylinder that gives me a lot of edges, right? So think of anything that you make in wireframe first, how you're going to approach creating it in wireframe. So if I were to do that, then I would, let's say if I visualize this, I would say I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Possibly I would have around a 10 face polygon, or even more, or even less, right? So if I were to imagine that, then maybe I only need less, because in here, in these little chunks, I only need less. So if I were to visualize that, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and get this smooth, and I'm going to add supporting edges. If you want to visualize it with the wireframe on it as well, you can do that. So as you can see, but you can also do it independently without the wireframe. So if you want to preview it with the wireframe or the structure itself originally without smoothing, like this, like both of them, you can preview at real time. You just have to press 2. If you wanna get rid of this weird blue wireframe, you just press 3. And if you want to get back to the original, press 1. So it's that easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue. So as you can see here, that when it's smooth, it's really expanded. So I'm gonna move this pretty far from each other, and I'm probably gonna also add some faces here so that it just stays there. Actually, I don't necessarily even need to do that, because all I need is to grab some faces here, right? And I'm gonna do some, I'm going to alter this method throughout the model. So let's say I'm already happy with this. I got 4 faces. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to press Ctrl E to extrude, right? And I want to get some thickness in there. and probably inflate it a little bit. So really up to you how you're gonna do this, but ideally this is how I see it that you could do as well. So there's many ways of doing approaching that certain problem, that like if you want to make that or remake some patterns, you could definitely do it this method. Press again Control E, and now I can add this on top of it. And as you can see, now I can also scale it or make it bigger. Really up to you how you're going to approach this now, but you could do a lot of things, definitely. So you can also add more subdivisions, but it looks weird if you add more. So you just want to make sure that that it looks smooth or soft. So as you can see, now I have replicated the same in here, right? So that's the beauty of it. Now I can just play with this while I'm in smooth mode. By the way, if you press 3 again, I can just play with this and modify my shape however I wanted it. So let's say I want to make this right here, this nice looking pattern. I would just have to modify my shape, probably extrude it again and again, and try to make the shape that I want using during my smoothing during my smoothing preview. That way I can see it what I want to achieve. So it's really as simple as that. There's no special magic or anything like that at all. It's just a matter of if you want to try to aim a certain shape. Now the beauty about this is when you're trying to focus more on your high poly, you're trying to also gain more confidence on your shapes. So it's really important that you get the shape right, you get everything right first in terms of what you want to get on the final result. And then later on when you're then you can figure out how to make your your low poly. So for this one, when I created my low poly, it's pretty easy as well, which I'll be showing you in a minute after I do more breakdown. So as you can see here, I also have these little pop out. So it's really not as special that you think. All you have to do is just grab a certain amount of edges, and I'm gonna go and rescale that down and tighten it up, and then I'm going to extrude it again and make that bigger like a flower, and then make that again, and just it's really simple things. It does not even take that much time. So as you can see here, you can remake that same thing. You can also try to do that, and you can do a lot of things with this method. And the beauty about this method is you can create patterns for ZBrush. You can make your own brushes or alphas and heights, and just have to take you can do a lot of things with this, and you can make your high poly as intricate as you want. The thing about this is that I can always be creative even if I'm not sculpting, and just focusing really on hard surface or sub D mode, and just making sure that it looks good in subdivision mode. It does not matter if it looks bad on the actual low poly, because you're not gonna use that. When I created the low poly for this one, as you can see, it's very clean, but I totally created that low poly and mocked this up from scratch. So when I created this, I would take my what do you call this? I would take a cylinder and get it to the right amount of face that I wanted. So if it were this case, I would make sure that my my silhouette still looks even and optimized, but also making sure that I have the right subdivision axes, and making sure that even if I look at the silhouette right now, it's not as low poly. Remember, you're making a high poly asset, and you're making a PC quality asset. Therefore, that the low poly should not look like a mobile asset, or should not look low poly, because you're dealing with high poly assets, and you're dealing with computer games, or making sure that it's still optimized, but making sure that it's still high quality enough that it could support the need. So in this case, what I did was I just have to do some mock-ups for my low poly. And you don't really need to make sure that your high poly comes from your low poly. It's really up to you how you're going to approach your low poly. It's just that sometimes, personally, I like to approach my low poly and my high poly so I can save a lot of time. But it's not really about saving a lot of time. Sometimes you're also making sure that even if you're saving a lot of time, you're also making sure that the quality of your asset is secured. You know, especially when you're dealing with high poly assets, or when you're dealing with you know high quality assets for PC games or for PS4, PS5, and you want to make sure that each of those assets are given attention. So in here, I just have to do a lot of adjustments, making sure that my low poly fits right with my high poly, and I wouldn't have any issues. So there's a lot of testing and making sure that it's acting correctly. It's not all perfect, so I'm gonna go ahead and for me right here, I might go ahead and select this face right here, and what I did was I'm going to Control E again and extrude. Probably not extrude, inset maybe. And then from there, what I did was I have to move it out a bit, as you can see. So there's really no special or magic here. It's just common sense, basically. So if you hold Control, sorry, not Control. If you hold Shift and then move this axis, then you can extrude out, and then possibly taper it a little bit, just so you have some nice silhouette even in the low poly. And that's how I made my low poly. Basically, it's really as simple as that, and making sure that the smoothing groups are correct, that it could bake properly in that base. Now, for this one, I started with a cube, and then I subdivided, well, at least one, so that I can make sure that I can copy the faces. So this is what I did for the lamps. So I also tried to start with a square, as you can see, and just try to slowly mock up the shape as much as possible. So that's what I did here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select both of these objects so that I can isolate both. So if you want to isolate, press Ctrl 1 after selecting. Now you can see it's isolated. Now you just focus on these objects alone. So now what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to make sure that my object has the right position, right low poly. Now you could always try to use some other programs to do this, but it's always better to manually do it yourself, just to make sure that you can deliver a certain quality. So I'm gonna go ahead and move this so that you see that it has that nice taper going on, and I'm slowly moving every single edge properly based on my needs. Well, it's not perfect. I could still see some, but it's a start, you know what I mean? So there you go. So you slowly got it, and now what I'm gonna do is you just have to extrude this out, this tiny square that you have here. And keep expanding it. There you go. And you're slowly doing it, it's as simple as that. And keep extruding it. Do a mock-up, man. It does not matter, as long as you're making sure that you're getting the shape correctly and the silhouette. Just cover as much space as possible and making sure that it's accurate enough. you'll get there in terms of shape. You just have to be very patient. Okay, so after this one, what I did was I pressed number 3, and I kind of smoothed it like this, basically. So that's how I generated that specific shape that I made for this. And from there, I just have to keep adjusting and adjusting, making sure that this shape is all good. It still follows even if I'm subdividing it right now, just because I'm not necessarily using the cube as my final low poly mesh, but I'm actually subdividing it so that I can follow it properly and accurately if in smooth mode. So as you can see, we're slowly getting there and getting that result. So you really have to be smart in how you're going to approach your high poly, your low poly. Just try to work as efficient as possible, and you should be fine. As the only rule in low poly creation is that as long as it matches, and that's it. You don't need to copy every single detail on your surface of the high poly. You'll be capturing that on the normal maps. You don't necessarily need to capture everything, because all of that will be done using normal maps. So you'll be capturing all of that. The rule is that you cover at least 90% or 80% of the silhouette, and the normal map should do the magic for you. That's the trick right there. So right here, I'm just going to, oh no, that's kind of too tight right there. So adjust these edges. So this is the beauty about it, is that we're trying to create this in smoothing groups, which is our low poly, and of course it's not finalized. Like, this is not like finalized in terms of like high poly or low poly, because we only finalize our mesh or our low poly when we press the smooth. But what you're seeing right now, it's just a preview. So when I like my silhouette of my low poly, then I will say, you know what, I'm going to press the smooth so that I can finalize it. So in this case, looks like I covered majority of my shape, and it's something that, I like how it looks right now. So I would go ahead and select my low poly, and then right now if I press 1, it looks like a janked. Oh god, that looks janked. But if I press 3, it smoothens that silhouette. So you want to see this on your on your actual silhouette. So how do you do that? So you select this, your mesh itself that looks like jank. You go to modify, or actually mesh, sorry, and then you go to smooth. And there you go, my friend. It's easy as that. And as you can see, if you go to wireframe mode, oh no, I pressed undo. It's quite tricky to select something in isolation, because it usually, there you go. So as you can see, it follows that shape. But the thing is that you don't want it, when you get to the head part, you don't want it too low poly like this. So you want to make sure that you're still getting some good quality. This right here, like the bottom going up, this is good. But here, this is the part that's getting big, right? So you don't want to do that. So what I would usually do, you can try to bevel it and divide it more. But I to save time, I would just detach this, and I would smooth this. See, that's working efficiently. So the reason why I can select this alone, because I select the edge around it, and then I also hold shift right click, and then I said detach. That's how you're gonna do it. once you detach that edge, it's no longer connected to this body right here. So now you can see it's completely accurate. I mean, like, I like that. I like that. But I mean, there's parts that are not as perfect. But you can just do a soft selection and adjust that manually. It's really minor things right here. So move that in. Could probably move that too, and that's pretty much it. And you know, you could start also making your disc as well, which I did again on the cylinder. It's really that simple. I mean, if you look at this, we only done this what, a few minutes, and it's clean. So that's pretty much how I covered my low poly for this one. So as much as possible, we would really need the low poly to be clean, so that we're not necessarily creating some low poly that looks really bad and isn't optimized. So this way, it's, you know, it's also clean, but also is very beneficial for your high poly. So I guess that's pretty much it in terms of breakdown. You have all you need in this video for this specific segment to create this specific candle holder. Now we'll be focusing on the next video, we'll be focusing about how we create the candle itself. And then later on, after that specific segment, then we'll be putting all these pieces together and how we can create our high poly with our hard surface high poly, and merging those two high polys together, and so is our low polys. So we're gonna have fun. So anyway, that's pretty much it for this segment at least. Just make sure that you clean up your smoothing groups as much as possible, and your low poly is clean. And as well as in terms of shape and silhouette, there's no low poly looking parts. So as you can see, that's pretty much it. Alright, thank you so much.